Australian taxpayers fund university research to the tune of $800 million a year. It's no small thing to come out of your pocket as a taxpayer. And to get their hands on the cash, university academics need to make applications to the Australian Research Council, who operate the process for assessing them. The council recommends to the Federal Education Minister which project should be funded. And occasionally, a minister declines to fund a particular project, whether it's on the basis that it contains national security risks, as for example with projects collaborating with foreign academics in nations with a very different attitude to intellectual property to us, or because the research area isn't a topic that is in the public interest as compared to the cost of that research task. Former Education Ministers Nelson, Tudge, Roberts and Birmingham very occasionally vetoed grants on these bases. Sometimes they were later approved once the risks identified had been mitigated, but other times the ministers made perfectly understandable calls that the precious taxpayer dollar would not deliver enough bang for buck, even if the research were to be well delivered. And unsurprisingly, the universities who want your taxes, as well as the Labor MPs and senators who both saw political opportunity and an alignment with their left-leaning colleagues in the academy, weren't happy about it. So now we shouldn't be surprised that upon their election, Labor appointed a committee consisting of Professor Margaret Shiel, Vice-Chancellor and President of the Queensland University of Technology, Professor Susan Dodds, Senior Vice-Chancellor at La Trobe University, and Professor Mark Hutchinson of the University of Adelaide Medical School to review the grant framework. And with a panel of people, and I'm stressed they are credible and capable people, but they are people with a direct interest in seeing more public funds go to universities and more university control over how that funding is applied, it should come as no surprise that they have recommended that the power of veto be taken away from the minister. Unsurprisingly, Federal Education Minister Jason Clare has given their proposal the big tick and indicated that Labor will legislate it. Now, I can understand why an academic whose area of expertise is, for instance, post-Orientalist arts of the Strait of Gibraltar, might be offended and even angry that the government isn't willing to fund his pet topic. Similarly, the birdsong expert, who wanted over $802,000 to fund her area of specialty, might be annoyed she had to jump through hoops before she could get it. Both of these examples are real, by the way. But it's entirely appropriate that a minister have the right to determine whether, given the finite resources of the Australian taxpayer and the hardship many in our community endure, a grant of this nature represents a use of funds that is truly in the public interest. These vetoes do most often affect the humanities. Now, don't take me as against the study of humanities here. I think they're really important and have studied them myself. There's just a real question about how much and precisely what should be publicly funded when the topics under the microscope are somewhat obscure and of remote connection to the opportunities, anxieties and risks faced by Australians, especially those Australians who haven't had the benefit of publicly subsidised university education. And by putting decisions about how to apply research funds in the hands of a so-called independent board of university leaders, Australians will now forever be denied the transparency that comes from the political process. Because up till now, if you didn't like, say, the coalition minister's call on the veto of a grant, you had a remedy at the ballot box. And no doubt, some people in the academy chose to exercise it. But in the hands of pseudo-independent board members utterly captured by the university environment in which they work, Australians won't get independence. They won't get a better application of funds. Instead, they will have a democracy permanently impoverished in this field, because it is yet another political space that will now be dominated by bureaucrats who aren't accountable and who will be immune from criticism lest their so-called independence be impugned. There's a simple test I apply when it comes to the higher education sector and its perpetual calls for more dollars. And that test is it right that I take $1 away from a factory worker, a tradesman, a single mum working in retail, or a small business owner, all of whom have never been publicly subsidised to go to university, to give it to this project? Now, lots of times the answer will be yes. For instance, where it's technology that will build the economy, to educate our children better, or to cure diseases faced by us all. But if that cost-benefit analysis can't be answered with a strong yes, well, then the answer should be a firm no. And we should commend politicians who have the courage to make those calls rather than handballing the tough decisions over to the bureaucrats.